On an ordinary morning, in August 2017, a frantic emergency call came from a mansion in a wealthy neighborhood in Farmington Hills, Michigan. A mother of 3 was found motionless on her patio beneath an open window. What appeared to be a tragic accident would soon reveal itself as something far more sinister. A calculated murder, staged by someone she trusted completely, captured on camera in haunting detail.
After a long court hearing, ultimately, Mohammed Al-Tantawi was sentenced 35 to 60 years in prison.
It appeared that she was actually cleaning the window and had accidentally fallen out.
He can die today and I would not go to his funeral. I would throw a party instead. I don't care about him.
Before we dive deeper into this case, I want you to think about something. How well can we ever truly know the people closest to us? What goes on behind closed doors in families that seem perfect from the outside? Drop your thoughts in the comments below as you listen. The morning started like any other for the Al-Tantawi children. School beckoned, routines called. But when 14-year-old Aya went searching for her mother to ask for a ride, she discovered a scene that would shatter her world forever. Her mother, Nada Huranieh, lay unresponsive on the concrete patio beside their home. Above her, a second-story window stood open. A ladder rested nearby. Cleaning supplies sat undisturbed. Every detail suggested an unfortunate accident during morning chores. Aya's screams brought her 16-year-old brother Mohammed running. He immediately began what appeared to be chest compressions while speaking with emergency dispatchers. The children's terror seemed genuine. Their panic felt real. Within minutes, police and paramedics arrived at the sprawling home, but there was nothing they could do. Nada Huranieh, just 35 years old, was pronounced dead at the scene. Officer Jordan, first to respond, found himself troubled by what he saw. The woman lay on her back, an unusual position for someone who had fallen from a height. There was no blood, no sign that the impact itself had caused her death. The cleaning supplies seemed almost too perfectly placed. The ladder stood untouched, as if carefully positioned rather than knocked aside during a fall. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong. Inside the guest bedroom where the window stood open, investigators noticed more peculiar details. A bucket of water sat undisturbed at the base of the wall. A bottle of Tilex cleaner remained balanced on the top step of the ladder. A torn bandage clung to the window ledge. Dried spray marked the closed window beside the open one. Why would someone clean only one window? Why use tile cleaner on glass? The questions multiplied with each observation. The scene grew stranger when detectives learned about the family's security cameras. Nada's husband, Dr. Bassel Al-Tantawi, mentioned the system but claimed he didn't know if it even worked. The couple had been separated for over a year, their divorce nearly finalized. When investigators checked the footage, they discovered the cameras were not only functional but had captured something that would transform this investigation entirely. Nada Huranieh lived for her children. Friends described her as radiant, someone who approached life with boundless enthusiasm despite the challenges she faced. As a personal trainer, she embodied health and vitality. Neighbors often spotted her jogging through the neighborhood, always with a smile that seemed to light up her face, regardless of what storms might be brewing in her personal life. Born to Haytham Huranieh and Nadia Hakim, Nada had married Bassel Al-Tantawi in Syria back in 1999. They eventually settled in Michigan, where Bassel established himself as an internal medicine physician with an impressive income exceeding $350,000 annually. The couple built what looked like an enviable life in an upscale Farmington Hills neighborhood. They raised 3 children together in a 10,000-square-foot mansion. From the outside, they seemed to have achieved the American dream. But beneath the surface, their marriage had been crumbling for years. Cultural tensions simmered constantly. Bassel, rooted in traditional Syrian and Islamic values, grew increasingly uncomfortable with the life Nada was creating for herself and their children. She worked outside the home, building a career as a fitness instructor that gave her independence and purpose. She stopped wearing a hijab. She dressed in workout clothes that Basil found too revealing. She took their daughters shopping, encouraging them to embrace American culture in ways that disturbed him deeply.
Growing up, my father was very, very strict in making sure he raised us in a very Islamic household. The problems would arise when he would try to enforce very old-fashioned, misogynistic, sexist type of views. The more that my mom started to be more outspoken for herself, the more issues it caused. For a while, my parents tried to hide it, but then arguments became a lot more out in the open. They're hiding absolutely nothing.
The breaking point came on Valentine's Day 2016. According to Nada's account, Basil threw her down a flight of stairs during an argument. Though he denied the specifics, Basil ultimately pleaded guilty to spousal abuse. The court placed him on an ankle monitor and imposed strict conditions. He was forbidden from contacting Nada for 2 years. Any visits with his children required supervision. He was ordered out of the family home. Around this same time, Basil's professional life collapsed alongside his marriage. State investigators charged him with multiple counts of Medicaid and healthcare fraud related to his Canton urgent care clinic. The allegations painted a picture of systematic deception, billing for services never rendered. In January 2017, he faced the consequences. 1 day in jail, and nearly $280,000 in fines and restitution. His medical license was suspended. His income vanished overnight. The divorce proceedings grew increasingly bitter. Basil complained in court filings that Nada lived too lavishly, racking up thousands in credit card charges at upscale stores. He claimed he could no longer support what he called their extravagant lifestyle. But Nada had her own concerns. Text messages would later reveal that she possessed information about Basil, knowledge that could land him in prison for financial crimes. She told a friend she'd kept quiet out of concern for how it might affect their children. But that silence hung over their divorce like a threat. A scheduled deposition for the divorce was set for the week of August 21st. Both Nada and Basil were expected to give testimony, to finally lay bare all the grievances and allegations that had torn their family apart. Nada had found happiness despite everything. She was building a new life. She had started seeing someone, a fellow fitness instructor, who understood her drive for independence. Her daughters were thriving, embracing the freedom their mother encouraged. The divorce would soon be final, and she could truly move forward. She never made it to that deposition. 2 days before she was scheduled to testify, Nada Huranieh was dead. The security footage told a story that contradicted everything the children had claimed. At 5:53 in the morning, the light in Nada's makeup room flickered on. Investigators watched as shadows played across the exterior wall captured by the camera. The footage didn't show the window directly, but those shadows revealed everything. 2 figures moved in that room. One shadow was clearly Nada. The other belonged to someone else, someone who had been with her in those final moments. Detectives watched in horror as the second figure dragged Nada toward the window. There was no struggle, no fight. Nada appeared limp, unresisting, as if already unconscious or worse. The figure lifted her body, a difficult task that required both strength and determination, and hoisted her toward the open window ledge. Then came the moment that would haunt everyone who saw it. Nada's body was pushed through the window. For a brief instant, the shadow of the killer remained visible, standing at the window, perhaps looking down at what they had done. The light switched off. Then, moments later, it came back on. The shadow moved purposefully now, positioning the ladder, arranging the cleaning supplies, every movement calculated, every detail considered. This was staging, pure and simple. The medical examiner's autopsy confirmed what the footage suggested. Nada had died from asphyxiation. She was already dead when she went through that window. The fall hadn't killed her. In fact, she had likely been dead for hours before her body was discovered, suffocated in the very room where her attacker then carefully arranged evidence of an accident. But who was the killer? Basil seemed like the obvious suspect. He had motive, means, and a history of violence. But his ankle monitor told a different story. The tracking data was ironclad. He hadn't been anywhere near the house when Nada died. That left only the people who were inside the house that morning. Nada and her 3 children. Nobody else entered during the night. The cameras confirmed it. The 12-year-old had been asleep the entire time. Aya, at 14, had made the frantic call for help. That meant the shadow in the window belonged to Mohammed, the eldest child and only son. 16 years old. The figure captured on camera had short hair. The person was clearly male. The timing of the movements matched Mohammed's presence in the house. When detectives reviewed the footage of Mohammed performing CPR on his mother, they noticed something disturbing. The teenager appeared to be going through the motions without actually applying meaningful pressure. It sounded like he was working frantically to save her, but the video showed something else entirely. He seemed to be tapping on her body with one hand while holding his cell phone in the other. Only when his sister and Officer Jordan approached did Mohammed begin pushing harder, putting on a show of genuine effort. The officer would later testify that in those first moments he'd suspected something was very wrong with what he was witnessing. The performance was too rehearsed. The grief didn't quite match the actions. When investigators extracted data from Mohammed's iPhone, they uncovered a pattern that was impossible to ignore. 50 phone calls to one number on the day of the murder, beginning at 4:27 in the morning. The contact was saved under a single word: love. 8 of those calls came before 5 in the morning. Looking back through months of records, detectives couldn't find another day with similar call activity. The number belonged to Basil. Father and son had been in constant contact throughout the hours when Nada died. Many calls lasted just seconds. Others went unanswered. One particularly telling call came from Basil's phone to Mohammed's at 5:55 in the morning, the exact time the cameras captured Nada's body being pushed from the window. Further examination of Mohammed's phone revealed a disturbing pattern of surveillance and betrayal. For months, he had been secretly recording his mother, conversations with her divorce attorney, private discussions about the case. Everything was captured and forwarded to his father. In Mohammed's phone, his mother wasn't saved under her name. The contact simply read, "Dog." 3 weeks before the murder, Mohammed sent his father a photograph. It showed the second-floor guest bedroom window, the very window Nada would eventually be pushed from. Investigators also found a search on Mohammed's phone asking how to remove a window screen. The timing couldn't be determined precisely, but the intent seemed clear: planning, preparation. The morning of the murder brought one final damning search. At 8:10, while first responders worked to secure the scene outside, while his mother lay dead on the patio, Mohammed searched for instructions on how to erase a computer. What was he trying to hide? When detectives brought Mohammed in for questioning, they tried giving him opportunities to explain. Perhaps it was an accident. Maybe he'd been helping his mother and something went wrong. A momentary distraction while holding the ladder. These things happen. No one would blame him for an accident, but Mohammed's story kept changing. First, he claimed he'd been asleep and knew nothing. Then, he said he'd woken early and brought his mother cleaning supplies. In another version, he was holding the ladder when she tripped. He saw her fall but couldn't stop it. Each telling brought new details, but none of them matched the evidence. None of them explained the shadow deliberately hoisting a limp body through a window. Basil arrived partway through the interview and immediately shut it down. He hired an attorney for his son before any more questions could be asked. But by then, the picture was already clear. Father and son, united against the woman who threatened to tear their world apart. Basil couldn't be there physically because of his ankle monitor, but he didn't have to be. His son would do what needed to be done. In the house, investigators found a washing machine displaying an error code. Inside, a tan bath mat. In the dryer, Mohammed's blue jeans and a shirt. Not a full load, just specific items. Small white flakes floated in the wash water, likely coating from the mat. These items, along with towels found near Nada's body, were collected for analysis. The theory emerged that one of these fabrics had been soaked in poison, used to suffocate Nada without leaving the defensive wounds a physical struggle would cause. Mohammed was arrested and charged with first-degree premeditated murder. He was 16 years old. Police released minimal information about Basil's role, stating only that insufficient evidence existed to bring charges against the father. The question would linger throughout the case. How much did Basil know? How much did he orchestrate from a distance? The case didn't go to trial immediately. Appeals, legal challenges, and then the pandemic delayed justice for years. When Mohammed finally stood before a jury in March 2022, the prosecution argued that he had suffocated his mother with a toxin-soaked cloth, then staged the scene to protect his father from whatever damaging information Nada possessed. The defense attacked the investigation, claiming police had tunnel vision. They pointed out that Nada had been seeing someone, a man who had successfully snuck into the house on previous occasions without the children knowing. If he could, why not someone else? They argued that Mohammed's changing statements resulted from police pressure. The detectives had fed him details, and he'd simply parroted them back. A significant portion of Mohammed's interview was ruled inadmissible. He hadn't been properly read his rights before that recorded conversation where he placed himself in the room with his mother. The confession, such as it was, couldn't be used. But the prosecution didn't need it. They had the phone records, the surveillance footage, the searches, the pattern of behavior showing a son who despised his mother's independence and would do anything to support his father. After just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict, guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. Mohammed was 20 years old by then, no longer the teenager who had killed his mother 5 years earlier. The sentencing hearing stretched nearly 4 hours and descended into chaos. Mohammed, representing himself, spent the time challenging virtually every aspect of his pre-sentencing report. He objected to words, phrases, entire paragraphs. He claimed the court was demonstrating prejudice against his Syrian culture and Islamic faith. He argued that media coverage had unfairly portrayed him as a woman-hating Muslim, potentially influencing his conviction. Judge Martha Anderson grew increasingly frustrated. Assistant prosecutor John Skrasinski described Mohammed as a skilled liar, practiced in the art of deception. He requested 40 to 80 years, arguing that society needed protection from someone capable of murdering his own mother with such calculation. Mohammed's 19-year-old sister Aya presented 2 victim impact statements. One represented family members in Syria and London, describing Nada as kind and generous, with an amazing heart and soul. The other was personal, detailing how the murder had devastated her own life, the trauma she carried every single day. When Basil stood to give his victim impact statement, he chose to speak in support of his son rather than honoring his dead wife. He characterized Mohammed as another victim, wrongfully convicted. Judge Anderson cut him off sharply. This wasn't about his son. This was about Nada. Basil wasn't the victim here. When he persisted, Aya erupted in rage, screaming at her father before being escorted from the courtroom. The family had been torn completely apart, and only one person would pay the price. Judge Anderson ultimately sentenced Mohammed al-Tantawi to 35 to 60 years in prison. He currently remains incarcerated at Chippewa Correctional Facility in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, maintaining his innocence and pursuing appeals. Outside the courthouse, Aya spoke with raw honesty about her feelings.
He can die today and I would not go to his funeral. I would throw a party instead. Like, I don't care about him.
She'd tried to be empathetic over the past 5 years. She'd attempted to sympathize with her brother despite everything. But hearing him portray himself as the victim, watching her father support the man who murdered her mother, was too much. This case raises profound questions about family loyalty, cultural conflict, and the lengths people will go to protect those they love. Muhammad apparently believed his mother was destroying their family by defying tradition, by seeking independence, by threatening his father's freedom. In his mind, perhaps he saw himself as righteous, defending his father and their culture against a woman who refused to submit. But the law saw it differently. A jury of his peers saw through the staging and the lies. They recognized the surveillance footage for what it was, evidence of calculated murder. They understood the phone records as proof of coordination. They interpreted the changed stories as consciousness of guilt. Nada Huranieh had been building a new life when hers was stolen. She'd found strength in leaving an abusive marriage. She'd established a career that gave her independence. She was raising daughters who felt empowered to make their own choices. The youngest daughter remains in her father's custody, a decision that haunts those familiar with the case. Aya chose foster care instead, unable to return to a household where her mother's killer was defended and her mother's memory disrespected. The family Basil claimed he was trying to preserve had been destroyed far more thoroughly than any divorce ever could have accomplished.